bread today. I've got a half of a loaf left, and so instead of going to the store, I've got everything I need to bake bread, so that's what I'm going to do. I have 2 teaspoons of yeast, and that turned out to be one of these packets. It says on the back that 1 packet equals approximately 2 1/4 teaspoons. And so I did measure it, and it looked like it was more, just 2 teaspoons, but I put all of it in there. I have 2 teaspoons of salt. I'm going to use some olive oil. I'm going to use about 8 cups of flour. I'm going to use 2 teaspoons of sugar and 2 2/3 cups of warm water. I've got 2 cups there. I'm going to have to get 2/3 of a cup more. On the back of the package of yeast, it said that you should use liquids between 100 and 110 degrees Fahrenheit to be sure that your yeast works properly. And I never use a thermometer. I've kind of gotten it figured out. So that says 102, and I'm going to make my 2/3 of a cup a little warmer. And you also need to, if it's a cold day and your bowl that you're using is cold, you need to account for that. So I'm going to get the yeast, the sugar, and the water into the mixer so that it can start to bloom. I'm adding the 2 teaspoons of sugar, the 2 teaspoons of yeast, and 2 2/3 cups of warm water to the bowl. Then I'll mix it just slightly, just so that everything can combine. Put the lid back on it and let it sit for about 10 to 15 minutes. So you can see the yeast grew a little. So I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of salt, 4 tablespoons of oil, and it doesn't need to be olive oil. You can use vegetable oil. If you don't have that and you have Crisco, melt 4 tablespoons of Crisco vegetable shortening down and put that in. After it's cooled though, you don't want it to kill your yeast. So the recipe says to put in 8 cups of flour. I put 4 in, and then I'm going to mix it up. And then I usually just do it by how it looks instead of how much it says. I'll put 2 cups more in. If you have a KitchenAid mixer, use that. If you don't have a mixer, just do it by hand. This is a Bosch mixer. Okay, put 1.5 more cups in. Okay, see how it pulled away from the bowl? So that means you have just about enough flour in it. Putting a half cup more. So I probably would have been okay to put the 8 cups in it, but you never know how much moisture is in the air on the day that you bake bread. So I'm going to go ahead and mix this or knead it on the 3rd speed for 5 minutes. Just be aware that whenever you have something as heavy as bread dough in your Bosch or your KitchenAid and on a high speed, that it will move. I usually stand right next to it and hold on to it. See how it walked its way over to the edge of the counter? Just be careful that it doesn't fall off. Okay, so you can see I let it knead for 5 minutes. And I usually put more flour in it so it's not this sticky. But I've been seeing lately how bread bakers on YouTube have a little stickier dough than what I normally do. So I'm going to try it this way, see if it makes a difference. So right now, I need to get a big bowl out and put some grease in it to turn this out into a greased bowl. And I'm just using vegetable oil because I want to save my olive oil for other things and not use it all up just for greasing pans and bowls and stuff. I'm putting a little bit of vegetable oil into the bowl and spreading it around with my hands. After I do that, I like to make sure that my hands are well covered, and then I pull the sticky dough out of the mixer bowl and form it into a ball, and then put it into the greased bowl and then turn it right side up. So that way everything is covered with vegetable oil. You can then cover with a clean kitchen towel, or I use 2 pieces of saran wrap or plastic wrap, and just placing them loosely on top of the bowl. And then when I place the dough in pans, I reuse the same plastic wrap. Then just put it in a corner or a warm place to raise for a couple of hours. On the day I did this, my kitchen was a little more cooler than normal, and it took about 2 hours for it to get to this point. You'll then want to grease your pans really well, either with cooking spray, or here I'm just using vegetable oil. You can use Crisco shortening or shortening. Just make sure you grease it really well. I have 3 pans here, and the ones that are on your left, the 2 that are on your left, I like the best. They have that slick coating to them. I don't know what they're called, but the one on the right, you'll see later on in the video, I had trouble getting the bread out of the pan. So I prefer the ones on the left. Next, I'm taking the plastic wrap off of the dough and punching it down. Next, I'll divide it into 3 equal portions as best as I can. You can weigh the dough if you have a kitchen scale, if you want to, but I usually just look at it and see if it looks even or looks equal. Next, I'm shaping each portion of dough into loaves, and I really don't know how to explain what I'm doing here, but I showed the making of all 3 loaves, so maybe you can figure it out by watching it. But I do pinch the bottom seam together and then kind of roll it so that it's long enough to fit into the pan. Once the loaves are made and put into the pans, then I just put a little bit of vegetable oil on top of each loaf so that it doesn't dry out and it won't stick to the plastic wrap. I then put the plastic wrap over the top of the loaves and put them in the same place where the dough rose earlier, and so they need about an hour or hour and a half to raise until they're ready to be baked. These loaves took about an hour and a half to raise to the proper height. Preheat the oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and then bake for 25 to 30 minutes. I then took some softened butter and put over the top. This makes the crust a little tender. I then put them out onto a wire rack so that they could cool. If you leave the loaves in their pans, then the bottoms get a little soggy. You can see here is the trouble that I was having getting the loaf out of the pan. So I left this part in so that you could see how sometimes it can be a little more challenging. And finally, it releases and comes out of the pan. I must say that this was the best batch of bread I think that I've ever made. And I think it was partly due to not putting as much flour in the dough as I usually do and leaving that dough a little more sticky. It gave it a really nice texture, and it was really tender and just really good bread. So thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time. Bye.